mental health talk show host and Twitch partner, here with our Save Point. So we're here to talk to you for a special sponsored episode. We are talking to Haesue Jo, who is the head of clinical operations at BetterHelp. Haesue is a licensed marriage and family therapist, head of clinical operations at BetterHelp. Her current clinical focus and interest includes Asian AAPI mental wellness, anxiety, relationship and family dynamics, trauma, and gender identity. To practice self-care, she enjoys spending time with loved ones, including dogs and cat, yoga and fitness, going to the aquarium, snowboarding in the winter, and seeing live music all year round. Haesue, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great intro. It's pretty much all of me in a nutshell.
Listen, you just handed it to me. I just had to read it without stumbling, at least once. So I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much. I would love, so first we always like to get to, especially our mental health professionals, we always like to get to know like what got you into mental health and psychology, and what got you into what you do.
Life, right?
Am I right? Yeah.
I think like many other people, when I was in undergrad, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I think it's pretty wild that we expect 18 to 22-year-olds to know like what to study.
Right.
And then I think I found during that first year, like, oh, college isn't just about figuring out what major is going to land me the best job. It really is a time to learn more about yourself, figure out your study practices, like what kind of work ethic kind of patterns are helpful for you. So when I approached it that way, it was like, okay, let me find a major that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Versus that's going to help me build a career, because I really don't know what I want to do. And I was fortunate enough to have met folks that were older than me that were kind of mentors that essentially gave me the permission to do that I didn't have to find a major that equals next job, right? So one of the most interesting things to me is people. People are really interesting and what's going on in here.
Yeah.
Like, humans are so smart. Like all the things that we've figured out in technology, like computers, the internet, transportation stuff, healthcare, all these things, really, really grand. And it's the people behind it that's really fascinating to me. So it's like psychology is pretty broad. And so I decided to study that. And in that study, you're then exposed to what kinds of career paths do exist. I heard this joke once from a professor that like people that decide to go into therapy, people that decide to turn psychology into their livelihood, there's something maybe seriously wrong with us. And we're just trying to figure that out, right? Trying to figure out what's going on with us internally by studying everybody else's problems and issues.
The whole thing is just a major projection. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. And so like many others out there, I had a pretty dysfunctional family growing up. I'm a child of immigrants. I grew up very isolated in terms of identity because I grew up in a community where I was an extreme minority. Like all these things coupled together really kind of built the beginnings of my career track. Out of college with a psychology BA, there's not a lot of options when you want to look for work. So I did what I could, and I found people that are doing what I do now in terms of what kind of license I have. And they're the ones that kind of set me on a path to figure out like, this is what I want to do, which is accompany people beyond their journey as they look for self-actualization, improved self-insight, better functioning in their lives. It's still the most interesting job to me. Like as a therapist, I get to learn about other people's jobs and career tracks very intimately. People talk about their jobs during therapy all the time.
Firsthand experience, can confirm.
And I still find years later, like I have the most interesting job still.
Yeah. Oh, so I love that.
It's a bunch of jumbled up stuff, but life led me here. I know that doesn't sound like super definitive, but
no, I love that. I absolutely love that. Life led me here, so we're good. We're on the same page. But that's wonderful. That's absolutely awesome. So we I don't know if you want to jump right into it. We prepared a few questions for you in advance. Maybe a few questions will come up like as we answer those questions. So I would love to get started on that list if you're down.
Sure.
So
Let's dive in.
first thing I will do is obviously plug and thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode and for providing us with Haesue. So the point of BetterHelp is that it's a worldwide network where you can access and get therapy. If you go to the link that is in chat right now, and we'll definitely be putting it in all the descriptions and stuff, that link will get you 20% off to try to start your journey. So I always like to give a tiny disclaimer that BetterHelp is probably not the best place to go if you are in need of emergency critical assistance, but it is a really, really great place to start your journey to mental health awareness and therapy and all that stuff that we talk about. That's just propaganda all the time on this channel. But yeah, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the questions that we had on our list. If you were on that list, please know you cannot ask another question until your question has passed. And then we have a list of questions after that. So some people ask 2 questions. And then if we still have time, which I don't know if we will because there's a ton of questions, if we still have time, then we will ask, continue with the audience. So that being said, let's get started. Let's see if this works. Oh, look at that. Okay. Zuki TV asks, if a user patient ever decides to request their record because they decided to go to an in-person therapy session, how should they go about it if they are using BetterHelp?
If you're currently still using BetterHelp and you're matched with your therapist, you can ask your therapist directly. Your therapist is the one that is the owner of any records, any kind of notes that you're seeking. Try asking your therapist directly first. Now, if you've canceled previously and your subscription's no longer active, then you know that you can't send a message unless you resubscribe. So if you're in that situation, then please email our team, contact@betterhelp.com, to request this help. Essentially, you can briefly describe what you're looking for. You're trying to request your old notes or something like that, and then they can try to help you get connected with the past therapist, since I know that right now a hurdle is to resubscribe. So again, if you're actively using the site, then you can just ask your therapist from your app yourself. And then if you don't have an active subscription right now, then email our team, contact@betterhelp.com.
Awesome. All right. Easy peasy. We're starting out. I don't know. Are these going to get tricked? No, the point is not to trick you and watch her stumble on this question about neuroplasticity. No.
Life is tricky and all of us stumble. So even if I were to do that here, that's okay. It's okay to stumble and it's okay to be tricked by life sometimes because it happens.
Oh my God, I love that answer so much. I was totally kidding, but that answer is the perfect thing. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Bliffle Splick asks, how long are the sessions and do they have to be in your area?
Oh, great one. So the sessions are generally anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. So once you're matched with your therapist, you'll want to ask about session length. They vary based on some of the approaches and the styles that the different therapists have here. So if your therapist responds with something that you're not interested in, let's say you're looking for a longer session and they say they only do 30-minute, you can actually change counselors and look for somebody that offers something that's more lined up with your expectations and your schedule. But you can expect for the live sessions to be anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes-ish. And then in between those live sessions, you have a messaging portal so you can message your therapist throughout the week. And you can also, get involved in some of the other things that are offered by BetterHelp, which you can see if you sign up. In terms of whether those sessions need to be local to you, no, that is the beauty of teletherapy. Right now, it's a little bit different than pre-2020, right? COVID and this pandemic has really changed the situation for a lot of people. And there's a lot of emergency orders placed by various governors across the country saying you don't need to be licensed in this state to practice. A lot of these orders are now being lifted since life is going back to a little bit normalcy. But still, if you're living in a rural community in some state out there and you want to find a therapist that's in a metropolitan area, maybe 75 miles away, you can have therapy sessions with them from the comfort of your own home as long as you have a strong internet connection. So it doesn't need to be local to you. And if you're an international user here, if you're viewing internationally, you can also get hooked up with a therapist at BetterHelp that can work based on that. So that is, I think, one of the great benefits of doing this I was trying to say digitally and virtually, but it came out as one word. That's one of the something like that.
Yeah, that's a word. It's a word now. We made it a word.
Yeah. that's one of the beautiful things of doing it this way is you're not limited to your zip code. So it could be that you're living somewhere where all of the local therapists don't specialize in this area that you really want to work on. You're now not confined to just where you can get to via transportation.
I love that. I love that. We actually have a user, without disclosing any information, but they're from Europe, and they were very, very grateful that through the BetterHelp sponsorship, they were able to sign up and have a therapist in their local area, and they were really excited about that. And I'm really excited about that I was able to like help connect them. Okay, our next question is Martizel asks, what certifications are required for online help chats?
So you as the client, you don't need any certifications. I don't think that's what the question is, but just so
in
we're
case,
clear.
just in case.
Yeah, as long as you're 18 and older, you can consent to your own mental health treatment on BetterHelp. Now, when I think you're asking about the therapists. So all of the therapists on the BetterHelp platform are licensed by a governing board. In the United States, each of the 50 states has a couple of different governing boards, and that's because they are managing and governing a bunch of different license types. So in the world of therapy, there's dozens of license types, but in practice, all of these folks are trained, educated, and prepared and equipped to work with you on your mental health concerns. Some of the different license types may have different educational backgrounds. So for example, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, which means my training and my experience is very focused on relationship. It's not just about marriage, it's really about family, and it's really about systems. So it could be your family of choice also that you're having dysfunction with, or you need to try to figure out some kind of communication problem. But I think of people as the product of the systems that they're in, systems of people. So it could be your family of origin that really messed you up, or it could be that your current friends have run into some kind of issue that makes communication challenging. So I really think of people in the context of relationship. There's also clinical psychologists who are more focused on like assessment and evaluation, intake, that kind of stuff. All this to say, all of the therapists are licensed, which means their governing board has made sure that they have a degree, a conferred degree from accredited university. They also go through a license verification process with us before they're approved to join the platform, which means that their license is being cross-verified with their respective governing boards. We're also making sure that all the licenses we accept are unencumbered, which just means there's no active disciplinary actions. And depending on whether there are any past, it's an internal review case by case. We also do a pretty extensive background check at the county, state, and federal level. So this, I think that's what the question was getting at. So rest assured, the person that you're talking to on the other end is a fully vetted and licensed professional. However, they're still people, and people might do something that you have concerns with. And if that's ever the case, we want you to reach out to us. We can't help you unless we know that there's an issue. So, all the interactions that you have with your therapist are confidential. So if you want some help with something that's going on, you got to reach out for help. So just email us at contact@betterhelp.com if you ever have issues with your current therapist or a past therapist and you're now thinking about it. Feel free to email us so that we can try to find a solution if you've had a problem.
Awesome. And Martizel, who asked the question, is here, and they said thank you. You answered their question. So yes,
Woohoo.
we're doing it. We're doing it live. Okay, Doc Crocodile asks, should an introvert be more out of their shell and socialize, or is it okay to be an introvert?
First, I'm going to say it's okay to be anything. Okay,
that's right. That's right.
So the should questions are tricky. Life is tricky. Because now you're starting to ask about like external validation. Like, should I be doing something because other people are? Should I be doing this because that's what the world expects of me? Should I be doing this because that's what a societal standard looks like? Sometimes the answer is not always yes,
Right.
And I think it's about looking inward and seeing if you have found fulfillment, if you have found satisfaction, if you have found health in your life, then what you're doing is fine enough, right? It is good for you. If this question is coming from like, gosh, I feel like I should be hanging out with more people because other people are, I think it's a good idea to evaluate what your personal needs are. Like the thing with introverts versus extroverts is where your energy comes from. Extroverts get energized by hanging out with groups of people, being with the crowds, like engaging with a whole lot of folks. Introverts are energized by that downtime by themselves, decompressing from all the stimulation outside in the world. I don't think one is better than the other. One is not more right than the other. And then there's also something called ambiversion. So ambiverted people have qualities of being introverted and extroverted. So my friend that asked this, if you feel that you're satisfied in your life and you're happy, you're fulfilled, and you're healthy, I don't know if you need to be doing anything differently. Now, if you're feeling isolated and alone and empty, hollow, sad because of this stuff, then it might be a good idea to consider connecting with people in a broader way than you might be doing right now.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of comments in chat about shooting your pants. So thank you. I feel like I've taught you all something, or the mental health professionals who have come through and used terms like that have taught you something. I'm so glad. I'm so glad my community knows not to should themselves. That's great. But yeah, should is a judgment term. Absolutely agree, Bliffle Splick. Yeah. Martiza wanted to give context to their question. My interest is because I'm looking to go back to school for mental health. So there you go. Yeah, you got to be fully licensed if you want a job.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next question. We're like running through these. Okay. Kyle 1009 asked, what are the key signs to look out to know if someone's doing better and changing their way of thinking in a positive way?
What a great question. Forward thinking, solution focused. This is where I think it's really important to consider tracking stuff, right? It's like if you've set out to achieve something or if you have a goal, write that stuff down, put it somewhere that you can come back to later. I think something that we all do is like we work towards something and we don't really notice, we don't really realize, we don't really look into the progress that we're making. We can look back and like tell ourselves that we haven't actually done much. But if you're writing stuff down, tracking and logging your progress towards something, now you have this visual, tangible thing to show you like, yes, you've made this effort towards this thing. You've seen the actual outcomes that you're looking for. So I think the only way that you're going to know is if you start logging in some way where you were so that you can see progress. And my reminder for anybody that's looking to change something or shift from point A to point B is reminding yourself that progress isn't always just one unidirectional or one line. It's not linear, right? It could look like taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It could look like taking 10 steps forward and 20 steps back, right? Progress takes us all over the place. Life is not the same for everybody. How to live life, there's no one correct way. And the journey in therapy is not really about becoming like a happy person all the time from being a sad person all the time.
Right.
It's about understanding your emotions, managing them in healthy ways, accepting that they are visitors to us and they're going to come and go. So I think I just keep coming back to, if you're interested in looking at progress, you got to track where you've came from and where you are. If you're really interested, you might want to look into something called SMART goals. So SMART is an acronym, and I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger here so you can find out what it is for yourself. But essentially, goals that we set for ourselves should be specific. And really, it's a lot of healthcare providers that are looking at it this way. They should be measurable. So if your goal is around, I don't know, like something behavioral, you want to try to be specific and you want to give yourself like deadlines almost to try to hit those things, because that's where self-discipline and accountability comes from. So look into making goals so that you can track whether you're doing things to get to the end product. And acknowledge that part of all of this is your journey too. And you should always give yourself credit for any progress. And really, even if the progress is going backwards, at least you're making an effort and you're trying something here.
I love that. I'm going to throw in some things that are not sponsored, but I have to promote because they've changed my life when I wanted to look at how to like watch my progress. The number one thing that I used to use actually, now I switched, but Dailyo is an amazing tool because it gives you a little, it's an app, again, not sponsored. It gives you a reminder every day to track how you're doing and maybe put like a little one sentence about it. And it also gives you a bunch of icons to track like what you did that day. And so basically the idea is not only do you have a chart to go back to that's like color coded with how you did, you also can see on days when I felt good, I played with my dog, I took a nap, I went outside, I took a walk, like, and so like that helps track your progress, and I absolutely love that. Recently, To Write Love in Arms came out with an app that's very similar to that, and it gives you daily inspiration on top of tracking your mood, and I've found that to be super helpful, and so I switched over to that. And then also, I just started using Notion for everything, and I cannot recommend Notion enough. It is an amazing tool, and it has so many templates that you can use that kind of, it helps you keep track of, like, you can use a journal, you can use it as bullet journal if that's better for you. So those are all things that, like, again, none of them are sponsored. There's just tools that I've used, and tracking your progress is helpful through a tool. So yeah, maybe they will help.
Yeah, I'm glad you plugged that stuff, because our memories are not that great.
Right.
And when we try to recall the past few weeks, what's really salient is like heightened emotion. So when we're really pissed off about something, when we're really bummed about something, we tend to remember those things a little bit more than when we're kind of neutral and coasting on our baseline.
Right.
Like baseline functioning is healthy, right? But it's more emotionally neutral. Maybe
right.
you weren't
There's nothing
feeling
to
anything.
remember. Right.
Yeah, but you're doing just fine. But then all
Right.
those days, those are good days, but we
Right.
don't tend to remember that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Because what would happen is, and what happens now that I use the To Write Love in Our Arms app, is I would walk through the day and I'd be like, oh, today sucked. And then the app is like, well, tell me what happened today. And I list out what happened, and I'm like, well, actually today wasn't that bad. It just ended on a bad note. And so I thought the whole day was bad, but so I like wrote off the whole day, but it wasn't that bad. And same thing, I'll notice like, oh, last month was terrible. And then I look at it, I'm like, actually I had quite a few good days, so it wasn't that bad. And maybe vice versa. Maybe you're like, I think I'm doing okay. I'm doing fine. I don't need therapy anymore. And then you look at your progress tracker and you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm gonna keep talking to somebody. So it goes both ways, and it's just tracking that. It's also amazing to watch yourself. Like with Dailyo, what I loved is that I slowly started noticing like my bad days I marked in gray, and then my best days were marked in orange. And I started noticing how my chart slowly was becoming more and more orange, with like gray still splattered in, but not nearly as much as it used to be. And if you tracked my progress, so I tracked it for like a good year, and if you looked at the progress through a year, you could tell that I had made progress, even though I might have said like, 2019 sucked. But like it wasn't a bad mental health year, and I still remember that data. So I feel like now I kind of maybe even automatically do it because I've gotten into the habit enough with the tool that like I don't need the tool. I still do it. Not saying I'm like amazing at this and I'm perfect and I figured it out and now I have no more mental illness. We all know that that's baloney. So but it does help. It really helps to track. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I thought of so many things while you're speaking. I had to like Google really quickly, like how many minutes are there in a day? Because you were saying something like sometimes you end the day with like, God, today sucked. But then when you look back, you're like, I guess it wasn't that bad. I heard this analogy before. Like, let's say somebody gives you $1,440. Okay, just randomly, they give you $1,440.
Sure, that sounds amazing. Great times.
And let's say something happens where you lose $5 of those dollars at some point in the day. Like, just because you've lost those $5, does it mean you're going to throw away the rest of this chunk of money that you've just received?
Right.
Probably not. So there's 1,440 minutes in a day. And just because 5 minutes of this day really sucked, maybe somebody pissed you off, somebody insulted you, somebody was really mean, or like something didn't go the way that you planned, should you throw away the rest of the minutes of the day there? Like, should that particular piece of the bad day define the rest of the day and then define your mood for the rest of the week or whatever it is?
I love that. That perspective is so freaking important. And so I'm going through a job search right now, and that's literally something I have to remind myself, like, okay, I may have gotten 3 denials, but I'm also in the interview process with this company and talking to this company about stuff. And like, the 3 denials really, really stick out in my head, but I think I'm still making a lot of progress considering like where I am on my journey and where I am in my career and all those things. And somebody in chat earlier today, it actually in our Discord, had to put that in perspective for me. They're like, wow, you're doing amazing. And sometimes you need that outside thing. But when it comes to your brain, you don't really have an outsider to be like, you're actually doing amazing. So you need this tool to kind of give you a little, so, you know, data is kind of sobering sometimes, right? You look at it and you're like, well, I put this in there, so it's got to be pretty accurate. Unless I lied to myself, which is not beneficial to me in any shape or form. So it's a really nice way to get an outside perspective.
Yeah, you don't have to believe in everything that you think.
Ooh, oh, that's a whole can of worms. That's a whole can of worms. But I mean, yeah, like you don't. There was a therapist once asked me to do an exercise. She was like, I dare you to write down every emotion that you experience throughout the day. She's like, just try doing it. And so I was like, okay. And I sat down and I started writing, and I was like, well, this is not going well, because I'm literally like writing words as fast as my hand can write them. Like, what is the point of this exercise? And I went back, and she was like, that is the point of the exercise. You have so many emotions throughout the day, but you pick and choose which ones to really direct your attention to. And sometimes they're not the ones that you could have directed your attention to. And yeah. I don't know if that's relevant to what you said, but I'm putting it out there anyway. Okay. Wait, next question, or did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I'm good.
All right. Next one. Fuzz Bubbles asks, how does one stay motivated to work on changes when it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back? What? This question is queued up perfectly. I totally did not do that on purpose.
What can help you stay motivated? I mean, it's that reminder I said, you know, progress is not unidirectional, meaning it doesn't just go one way. Sometimes it goes up and down and like all over the place, side to side, front and back. Like it's just, if you've ever worked towards something, then you know that it's not always like achievement. Like there's going to be setbacks. There's Murphy's Law. Things go sour all the time. So I think it's important to remind yourself of intention. There's other daily exercises that people will use on different apps or journals and that kind of stuff. Is like, we all hear about gratitude exercises. If that's something that you're curious about or you're already doing, I might even start looking into intention too. It's like setting a gratitude, but also setting an intention today. Like, what is it that I'm trying to get towards? Sorry, my front door just opened. So
are we about to hear the barking? The barking.
Yeah, I was a little bit anxious that the dogs would start barking, but it's actually quiet, so we're good.
We're good.
But now my
I'm like disappointed.
Got thrown off.
I'm sorry, but I'm kind of disappointed. I was expecting a whole borking, and we just got we just got one little woo.
Oh, now they're here. So
we love.
I think it's really important to think about intention, right? That's what's going to keep you motivated, because what sets you back is forgetting why you're doing this in the first place. Like, what is the purpose here?
Right.
What am I trying to achieve? And acknowledging that a lot of times, like big time goals, you're not going to achieve it today anyway. So it's okay if you didn't hit that kind of like milestone on the day that you were planning to. It's about readjusting, revisiting goals to make sure that they make sense for you in the ecosystem of your reality. And if you find that you can't stay motivated towards something, I would even challenge you to like evaluate, is this something that's even that important to you? And you know, we all have to do stuff that doesn't feel super important to us all the time, like whether that's like obligations at school or at work. But so zoom out and think of the bigger intention, the bigger picture. School is the means to the next step. This project that you might not care about so much is the means to the next thing in your career or in your personal life. So I think my response is really just about like, what is it all for? Those are the things that are good to remind yourself of, instead of like shifting that attention and just focusing so much on the setbacks.
Yeah, so actually I have a little Post-it that reminds me what this is all for. Yeah. It's
nice.
Yeah, so I am good and can do better. Yeah. But my point is, without like getting too personal into it, but my point is that if I didn't have it written down, and part of the reason every episode I talk about our purpose and why we're here, and we talk about be the light and, being there for others when you might not feel well yourself, like we repeat those over and over and over again. And I sometimes, like, even though I say it kind of almost robotically now because I know the script, once in a while it hits me weird. And I'm like, oh, I say this all the time, but this is why I do this. This is why I come in, episode out, and this is why we have these conversations. Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, set reminders, put them, stick them to your,
Post-its or on
yeah.
your phone, or like even a note on your mirror, like somewhere that you visit every day, like the restroom. Like the bathroom is actually a place where I have a lot of my clients put affirmations, their
Yes.
intentions, like
Yep.
something like that, because this is a place that you are going to go to at least once a day.
I hope more
And
than that. Jeez.
yeah, I hope, yeah. Drink water, folks.
Yeah.
That you're going more than once a day. But I think a lot of times when we lose focus or drive towards anything, it can all come back to one question of like, what am I doing?
Right.
What is the point of all of this anyway?
Right.
So be able to answer that stuff. If you're doing stuff in your life that you have no answers to those things, like, are those things that you're doing serving you anymore? Are they healthy for you?
I love that. I love that. Fuzz Bubbles, who asked the question, says, thanks. Good advice. Awesome sauce. All right. Let's see. Who do we have? Oh, no. I'm sorry. I pasted the question that somebody just asked. Sorry. That's out of... No, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. It's out of order. Everything's out of order. Okay. King Ninja asks, how do you make things easier when you're having bad days?
That's a tough one. I think let me try to answer, like, talk about something a little bit different that's related though. It's okay to have bad days. Um, it could be that some months or even some years you have more bad days than good ones. And if you start now self-inflicting guilt and shame for feeling that way on top of having these bad days, it can make it so much worse. So being gentle with yourself, having compassion with yourself, and reminding yourself of this wonderful saying that it's okay to not be okay. The other thing is, like, identify things in life that bring fulfillment to you. I'm not talking about like identify things that make you happy, because happiness is pretty fleeting and it doesn't last very long a lot of the time. It's really about fulfillment. It's really about things that make you feel healthy and satisfied with the life that you're living. So if you find that more of your days are bad than not, consider talking to someone, consider adopting new hobbies into your life, consider a refresh, consider doing something different. Things are generally going to stay the same if you do everything exactly the same. So in the immediate, right, like, it's a little bit different than this long-term stuff I'm talking about. Like, long-term, of course, find support, look for stuff that brings you this kind of fulfillment and satisfaction that I'm talking about. But in the immediate, it's really important to take care of yourself and to tune in and listen to your body. So if you are at the point of exhaustion and you can't go on any further because of the day that you've had, tune in and think about what it is that you need. What are the needs that have not been fulfilled today? Are you nourishing yourself with food that makes sense for your dietary needs? Have you incorporated movement into your life that makes sense for your body? Have you gotten some sun today? And if you didn't, and it's already 2 a.m., so it's too late for that, consider carving out some time to get some sun tomorrow. It's really important. And
we're just
I joked about it
sophisticated
before.
plants.
Yeah. And I joked about it earlier, but seriously, hydrate yourself, drink water. Like, dehydration leads to fatigue, and people that are fatigued start feeling depressed. So drink some water, So these are the pillars. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't see because my background here, but
Damn.
but these are the pillars of caring for yourself, is making sure that you're nourished by the foods that you eat, incorporating movement, getting some sun, and think about sleep hygiene. I know, like, in this day and age, it's really easy to just go to sleep late. I just learned of this term called, like, oh God, I can't remember what it's called, but the concept is like something revenge procrastination.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God, I read your mind. Yes.
Yeah. It's people that don't have a lot of control over their daytime. So people with like a full-time job, for example, tend to go to sleep really late because it's almost like getting back at the universe for taking away that time from them. So I'm going to just go to sleep really late so I can do whatever I want.
So I can have some time to be myself,
me.
Yeah.
And I totally do that sometimes, especially now. I'm working from home, so I don't have the structure of needing to go into an office right now. So it's very easy to find myself wanting to go to bed later and later and later. That's when I feel the most energetic. I'm a night owl. But I have to think about, like, function. I'm also an older night owl. And if I don't get enough sleep for myself, I feel like crap the next day. So you really want to be making sure that you get enough sleep. And if you have a lot of anxiety, if you have insomnia, then you're going to probably want to look for other solutions, and you can find that stuff by finding a therapist that specializes in this stuff. You can also think about basic sleep hygiene things. If you're trying to fall asleep and your TV's blaring right next to you, it's probably not a great environment conducive to good, heavy sleep. Um, so look into sleep hygiene, like what kind of lights will keep you awake. Temperature stuff matters. Is your bed full of dogs at night? Like my bed is, but I try to get them off so that I can at least fall asleep. And then they can come up once I've fallen asleep.
No, that's a real problem. It's a real problem for people with puppos. Mine likes to sleep under the bed, so I don't have that issue. But yeah, it's a real issue.
I mean, it broke my heart initially to tell my dogs no, but I realized, like, when I let them fall asleep in bed with me, I have more back pain. I'm just not as comfortable. I wake up more. So I fall asleep with them on their own beds. And then in the morning, they end up on my bed anyway. But, try to do what you can in the night hours when you're going to bed to ensure that you can fall asleep.
Yeah. Okay, so we did have a really good question from Maywin that I wanted to answer, and it was a little too long, so it's not adding to the queue, and I think we can answer it fairly quickly. But so Maywin asks, what happens when a client subscription time runs out? Are there plans to start reminders to clients or their therapist that subscription time is about to run out? I didn't realize my subscription was about to end until it ended, so I'm locked out from sending my therapist any type of communication to tell her I'm all right. I worry this is the type of abrupt ending could do someone in a more fragile state. What this could do to someone in a more fragile state of mind?
That's a good question. So it sounds like the person that asked this, your subscription has already expired. So what I'm about to say might not be super helpful to you, but it might be helpful to somebody else. You can always view your subscription renewal date in your billing settings. No matter if you have an active subscription, the date that it's going to renew is in your settings. Now, I understand you're essentially suggesting that there be a reminder. So that is a very good suggestion that I can pass on to the right folks. But at the least, if you currently have an active subscription and you're not sure when it's going to renew, just find the billing settings in your account settings and you'll see the upcoming date. If you're on the standard monthly subscription, you can also remind yourself that it renews every 4 weeks. So you can set a reminder in your phone or a digital calendar or something like that every 4 weeks, every 28 days. When it comes to what you're describing, if there is an urgent need or message that you need to get to your therapist, there's a couple of options. Like one of them, an option that may not make sense for you financially is to resubscribe, right? So if that's the case, let's say you resubscribe and it was really because you just needed one more session or you needed one wrap-up thing. After you cancel from there, then you can contact us by emailing contact@betterhelp.com to request a prorated refund for any of the time that you haven't used. Another option is to email our team directly to see how they can further assist you with what your situation is. And again, I know I said a million times, but just email us contact@betterhelp.com.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, this is beautiful. Thank you so much. And yeah, Blissful, having reminders is vital, especially people who have ADHD and stuff. Yeah, I'm one of those people that I will get all the email reminders and then still be like, what? When did this happen? Okay, so next question from the queue is Ace FTW asking, what are some ways to remember to practice mindfulness without it feeling scheduled?
Ooh, this is a good one because so I love mindfulness and I practice from that lens with all of my clients, even when I don't explicitly state that. So folks that are not really familiar with what mindfulness is, I imagine like a lot of your regular viewers, you've talked about it if you're talking about anxiety
ad nauseum, but please go for it.
Being in tune with your present moment, which interestingly, a lot of us are very bad at.
It's hard.
Yeah, we're socialized and raised in a world that's very go, go, go. We're very future oriented, save for the future, work for the future, but are we really caring so much about the present? Like everything is future oriented. A lot of our emotional woes are past oriented. So what about the present moment? I think that's part of what's happening in mental illness is that you've lost sight or you've lost some grasp of enjoying and finding fulfillment in your present moment because you're either so depressed about the past or you're freaking out about the future that your present moment gets none of your attention. So that's really what mindfulness is about, is bringing your attention back to right now where you are safe, where everything around you is good, unless you're not safe, of course. And so when clients are first being introduced to mindfulness, they're probably going to be prescribed like You should sit down and carve some time to meditate, like tune into your senses, do some of this stuff with your muscles, like try this thing or look for these colors. Like I can understand that the question is about like, how do I do that without it being so structured? Because the goal ultimately is to incorporate mindfulness ability all throughout the day. It's not about like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I better tune into my senses. It's, I am a present person that's always paying attention to my life. So that takes practice. So one tip that I have found effective for some folks is, so I'm saying this because I know not all people are going to want to do this, but whether it's like a ring or a bracelet or something that's like that you can put on your finger or your wrist or your hand, you know, something that you're going to see on a regular basis that's on your person. Every time you see it could be just a quick reminder to tune in for a second. Mindfulness exercises don't have to be 5 minutes of carved out whatever. It can just be a quick scan of like deep breath. I am here right now. I can feel my feet on the ground. I can tune into what the temperature is. I can pay attention for a quick second to what I hear around me, what I see. And this takes your mind out of freaking out about the future or woe is me about the past. So that's a tip, is to incorporate something visually somewhere on your person to remind yourself until it becomes second nature where you don't need that visual reminder or cue.
Love it, love it, love it. What if I, without giving advice, because we have the professional here for that, what I did to help myself is I took things that I normally do and just tried to be more aware and present as I do them. So like Nathaniel said, my favorite mindfulness quote is, when you're washing the rice, wash the rice. So I am a big tea drinker. And in the morning, every single morning, I drink a cup of some kind of caffeinated black tea. And so what I try to do is I kind of use that as a little mental reminder, like, oh, I'm holding a cup of tea. What if I took a second to sip it intentfully? What if I went out and looked out the window while I sipped my tea? What if I named a few, like, how do I feel while I sip my tea? So I've attached the ritual to something that I'm already doing. Another thing that I did, and this is going to sound really silly, but I actually recently bought a different toothbrush than the one I had. And this one has a 2-minute timer and tells you when it's time to switch quadrants in your mouth. And that
I
sounds
have the same
really
toothbrush.
okay. So it sounds really silly because it's like, okay, you're just brushing your teeth, but it forced me to spend, one, you have to spend the full 2 minutes brushing your teeth. Two, you have to be mindful. Where did I brush yet? Did I brush here? I have to switch now. Because it like forces you to tune in. I will still say I still tune out sometimes. So like my ability to not be mindful is immensely more powerful than any toothbrush that I have. But there are times where it like kind of wakes me up and snaps me back into it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I was brushing my teeth. Let me focus on brushing my teeth. And so that might seem silly, but maybe it's helpful to someone. Yeah.
I think what you're describing is amazing, and it's
Yay.
stuff that has come up in session with me and clients too. Like we talked about dogs just a second ago. So if my client happens to have a dog and I know that they walk them regularly, this is where I'll challenge them to maybe incorporate mindfulness on those walks. A lot of people while on walks like to tune out of it, and it's just something they're trying to get over with. And we're describing like intentionally putting ourselves into autopilot, and that's kind of the opposite of mindful living. And even further from that opposite is dissociation, like completely removing yourself from consciousness from your life. And I think mindful attunement to every moment is challenging for some because it means you have to start paying attention to the pain. It means you have to start paying attention to moments that aren't so great. Right. Yeah. And that's part of personal growth and development and evolution of who you are, is figuring out how you can notice that you're not feeling so great, acknowledging that and responding to it in healthy ways instead of being, incapacitated by your emotions.
I love that. Thank you so much. We only have 15 minutes and we have like more questions. So, okay. Okay. Phoenix asks, being prior military, a lot of humor coping mechanisms are considered to be rude or inappropriate by civilians. Do you have any suggestions for coping behavior that would be more appropriate for a corporate environment?
What a loaded question.
Right.
My friend. Right. Okay. So my partner is a Navy veteran. Thank you for your service, veterans. And what I have observed, not just from my partner, but from clients that I've had are not just veterans, but also active duty, is that those coping mechanisms, they're effective when you're in military, right? Like a lot of times there are things that are very challenging to you and you don't get the luxury of sitting down and processing your feelings with your
Right.
quadrant or the people around you. So a lot of times you have to do these things to get by, to get through, and it makes sense there. So taking us out of the context of just military, thinking about coping mechanisms, a lot of times we develop these things in times in our life or in settings and environments where they do make sense. They help us survive, they help us get through. But once you remove yourself from that context and you're in a different environment, now it doesn't always make sense. And sometimes it's even disruptive to the people around you. So I do know of some research and studies that show, like, for example, a lot of employers, they tend not to hire veterans because of this like implicit bias or assumption that the social aspect or the social collaboration between veterans and civilians is very different. Um, so all this to say, like, I think it's important to figure out healthier coping mechanisms, right? Like if you're asking what are ways I can cope with a corporate environment that I don't know now, like it's not something that we can answer in 15 minutes or even an hour. It could start looking like a journey towards improved self-insight. Of course, I'm biased. I'm going to recommend that everybody considers therapy, but especially if you're a veteran and you've needed to, kind of flip your life around and adjust to civilian lifestyle and culture that's very, very different sometimes. It can be worth it to consider talking to someone to get some real person-to-person feedback about some of the ways that you speak or your language style. This kind of stuff can sometimes be happening and you're not even aware. So I'm wondering, veteran, if you've said something in the past and somebody said that that was rude and you didn't even realize that that was rude and your intention was not to be rude. So it's really about backtracking and figuring out like, okay, so how can I communicate with people that don't have my history and don't need to look at things the exact same way that I have in the past? So I don't know, this is where mindfulness can be really helpful too, because if you're constantly paying attention to your internal process and your thoughts, then you can catch yourself before you say something. Like if you find yourself wanting to talk, think for a second, like, am I talking right now because I'm listening for comprehension and to respond from a place of love? Or is my response coming from a place of fear? Am I fearing something? And that's often why we use humor, right? Because we're actually deflecting something or we're scared of something. So it could be worth it to take pause to just like think about what you're trying to achieve with what your response is initially. Like sometimes it's not appropriate to be joking about something, and if that's your initial reaction and response to want to joke about it, it could be because you have some kind of defense mechanism up and you're not comfortable with this topic. So what could you be doing for self-exploration to get comfortable with a bunch of different things that you haven't been exposed to or things that you don't have a lot of practice with?
I love that. I love that so much. I hope that that was an in-depth and good answer to that question. And somebody in chat also said maybe finding other veterans who are in similar situations. Like that's always amazing, finding community.
Yes, that's such a good idea, and I'm sad that I didn't say it myself. There's so many veteran communities out there because there's a unique set of challenges and a unique set of mental health concerns that come up with this population of people. And a lot of times your civilian therapist is not even going to get it. And so finding folks with knowledge of veteran culture and like how things work with the VA, for example, these are really important for your therapist to be aware of too. There's so much stuff online. There's a lot of great nonprofits now that are run by veterans themselves trying to provide this kind of support to others. And if you're working in a workplace, I would look into your employee assistance program to see if there's any benefits available specifically for veterans. A lot of places do have programs in place to hook you up with a mentor, for example, who's also a veteran that's been out for quite a bit longer, that can be available and present to help you adjust.
Yay! Love it. Okay. I say yay. I hope that doesn't come off as like colder because we're talking about something very serious. I'm sorry. Yay meaning we answered another question. Okay.
I mean, yay, we're talking about stuff that
We're talking about
historically
mental
a lot of
health.
people didn't want to talk about.
That's right. Yay. Yay. Okay, Stride Cypher asks, would you advise someone thinking about teletherapy for the first time that they get a local psychiatrist that they can visit in person at least once? Is it important for someone, if they never had any therapy at all, to start teletherapy?
Okay, there's a couple of different questions in there. First is not everybody needs a psychiatric evaluation. So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor with a specialization in psychiatry. They can prescribe medication to you. It's not the same thing as a talk therapist. So that's a first distinction. People that go into talk therapy, they may already be on meds prescribed by their primary care physician, or they may go into talk therapy and the therapist may provide a referral to see a psychiatrist, but it's not like you have to be in one to be in the other. So you don't need to be seeing a psychiatrist to try teletherapy. If anything, I think the vast majority of users of BetterHelp have never met with a psychiatrist. If you've never done therapy at all, BetterHelp is a great option, not just BetterHelp, but teletherapy in general. It's not that therapy is being reinvented. The therapists here are the same. You know, we're still educated in the same universities. We're still going through the same licensing requirements. It's not that the people doing this work are any different than the folks you would find offline. It's just the venue's a little bit different. You're not restricted to just going to an office or a clinic. Now you can just do it from anywhere you have good internet connection. So, what was that second part of the question?
Okay. Is it important for someone that's never had any therapy at all to start with teletherapy?
Not necessarily. Like, you know, teletherapy hasn't been around for that long. Probably less than 20 years, really, in the versions that we know. And plenty of folks before that were still going to therapy. So, you know, there's pros and cons to in-person therapy, and there's pros and cons to teletherapy. So I think it's important to figure out what works best for you. So, you know, just like no one diet works for everybody. And I'm not talking about like fad diets. I'm really talking about the lifestyle choices that you make with what you consume. You really got to think about like what your specific dietary needs are. Do you have food allergies? Do you react to something? Are you lactose intolerant? Like that means you can't have this. Like, so it's the same thing in therapy. Not one approach is going to fit every person. So if you're that curious to compare, do some testing in your life and try out in-person therapy, try out teletherapy, see what works best for you. At the same time, I think if your options are limited, if you are restricted, really, whether that's due to transportation issues or finances or something like that, try the one that's most accessible to you. And see how it goes, you know, and just because you have a poor experience the first time or even the first couple of times, my encouragement is not to give up. You know, like finding a therapist that you feel safe with, that you mesh with, it's not easy. Some people might find it on their first try, but this is somebody that you are entering a very intimate relationship with. Eventually, you're probably going to be talking about stuff that you haven't told anybody in your life. It could be stuff that you haven't even admitted to yourself. So if you don't feel safe with this person, I don't know how you can expect for it to be a fruitful journey. So don't give up just because you've had a few sour experiences. We all know that, like, whether it's looking for friendship, looking for love, looking for even teachers that we like, looking for colleagues that mesh with us, like it's not a one size fits all.
Take some time.
And some of the most beautiful connections and best relationships come from having tried a bunch and failing at certain things, and then finding really what makes sense for you specifically.
I love that so much. And here's what I say, like, because people have asked me, they're like, do you use BetterHelp? And I'm like, I have used BetterHelp. I have tried BetterHelp. I found better experience not in teletherapy. That just worked for me. But the reason that I support BetterHelp and wanted to work with BetterHelp is because it is a tool. It is another tool in the toolbox. I want people, the whole point of the show is that you walk away going, oh, I think I'm depressed. Here's where I can go to get reliable information on that. Oh, I think I would like to try out therapy. Here's a space that I can go and try therapy in that's easily accessible to me. Oh, I think my friend has bipolar and I don't know how to support them. Here's a resource that I can go to and talk to somebody about that. So the whole goal is to give you as many tools as you want. And I think when people go like, oh, teletherapy is here to replace mental health, like other therapy, and it's ruining the like I hear that and I'm like, this just sounds like a moral panic over nonsense, like over nothing. It's an option, and we need to give people in today, like today we have a severe shortage of, like, the biggest issue is access to mental health help. So why wouldn't we be just happy that good mental health resources exist out there and be promoting them? And that is the bottom line for me. And I just felt like I had to say that. Okay, I felt like I had to point that out, because I see so much stuff on Twitter that just like bugs me about it, and so many like, ooh, I have an edgy opinion. And anyway, I'm not going to go on a rant. We're good. Everybody's got this. Okay, next question is from Leslie Morth. How do you employ and account for differences in certification for BetterHelp therapists and assisting their clients across state and even international borders? We kind of answered this a little bit before, but maybe you can touch upon it again.
Kinda, yeah. So I talked about how there's emergency orders that's specific to the past like year and a half or so. There's also different things going on in legislation that essentially allow legally for the practice across state lines. And so BetterHelp has legal consult, and we have a team of folks looking into this legislation. And the thing with law is that it can be interpreted, right? And so like this is BetterHelp's legal consult's interpretation of when we're doing things, but it's still up to each individual therapist to do their due diligence. And so therapists that are working across state lines, therapists that are taking clients overseas, these are therapists that opted into that themselves. So they are the folks that did their due diligence, did their research, and they are the ones individually that have made the choice to open themselves up to these referrals. And BetterHelp has made it an option for them. So hopefully that kind of answers that question.
Okay. I think so. Okay, so my next question here is, so we have like literally 2 minutes. Can we keep you for a little bit longer just to finish off a few? Okay, so I want to focus the questions that were asked before, not the questions that were asked like during this conversation. I want to make sure we get to the ones that people asked on Thursday first, if that's okay. Okay, Leslie says, yeah, that more or less answered it. Thank you very much. Perfect. Okay, so Zuki asks, regarding diagnosis, if a therapist from BetterHelp sees a diagnosis as necessary, would they just refer to someone outside of BetterHelp, or how does that work?
Loaded question. Like, so the thing with diagnosis is that it's not always necessary to go forward in a therapeutic process or treatment. If I'm understanding the question correctly, is it getting to is it like, can BetterHelp therapists make diagnosis?
I think that's how I'm interpreting it. That's how I would interpret it.
So like, if you look at the client terms and conditions, which anybody can look at anytime, betterhelp.com/terms, you'll see there's a section there that just says you can't expect for this platform to serve as a diagnostic tool for you. You cannot expect for it to replace in-person services or evaluations that may require an in-person meeting. So on the therapist side, they are told in their own terms and conditions, you are not to treat or make diagnoses in any kind of way that wouldn't require an in-person meeting, right? So all this to say, like, we acknowledge it as best as we can, and we make it pretty clear that teletherapy is not the same as in-person therapy. There are some limitations here. So you shouldn't be doing anything, therapist, that you're supposed to be doing in person. Now, their licensed therapists are able to make diagnosis. So they will be able to tell you if you meet criteria for something. You can probably find out if you meet criteria for something. The thing that the therapists, not just at BetterHelp, but all over the country at least, is using is the DSM. So you can look up the DSM. I'm pretty sure there's like free ways to get to looking at criteria for different mental health diagnoses. You can talk it out with a therapist too if you've figured out that you might have this certain thing going on in your life. And they can talk it out with you. Now, my answer, I know, is coming from like a biased lens. Like, I'm not one that thinks that diagnosis is required to move forward in progress in making treatment for a life. I think it can be an interesting point. And of course, it's like required in the world of insurance and getting things reimbursed and all that kind of stuff. And depending on what your situation is, it might be that you need this diagnosis to move forward. But I don't think you're going to be restricted from using BetterHelp if what you're looking for is diagnosis. It's worth it to just bring it up with your therapist to ask them if you can talk about a diagnosis or if they have any ideas on what you might meet criteria for. And then if you're looking for like an official evaluation or if you need paperwork completed because you've been mandated into therapy by some kind of authority figure, BetterHelp might not be the best solution for you. But if you're already using BetterHelp, you might be able to ask your therapist to see if they can link you up with other resources. The nice thing is that the BetterHelp therapists will be able to hook you up with other stuff outside because they're mental health professionals. They know what's out there. They can help you research for finding the right things. Because I think sometimes in the world of healthcare, we just don't know what to look for. I don't even know what to Google if I'm looking for X, Y, and Z service. So hopefully your therapist can point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Okay, this lightning round, almost, not really. Okay, King Ninja asks, what can I do to feel not as much of a disappointment, to feel like I'm not a disappointment? So I guess if you're being really hard on yourself, what is something that you can do to be a little bit kinder?
That's a big question
It's
too.
a big question for 2 minutes.
Yeah, big question for 2 minutes. Thinking again about like internal satisfaction and drive versus external validation and motive. Like if you're feeling like a disappointment to other people, think about those relationships. Like, are these people healthy for you? Do they ever acknowledge the positives and the strengths that you have? If it's all very internal, if you're feeling like a disappointment to yourself, what are the things that you have control over? What are the things and the small actionable things that you can incorporate into your days to get towards something that you feel better about? Are you living a life that you feel good about? You know, if you look back on the day, did you do stuff? Are you logging things? Are you tracking things that you can look into to acknowledge and give yourself credit for? Um, so, you know, I wish I could give you more in the short time that we have, but I think it comes down to self-esteem too and sense of self. If you don't know yourself very much, it's very hard to love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, then you're not going to feel great about yourself on a pretty regular basis. So this is my encouragement to embark on the journey towards self-love. And I know it sounds very hoo-hoo, but that's where it all starts. You know, if you don't like yourself, then you're not going to take care of yourself very well. You're going to convince yourself that you don't deserve good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to start thinking a whole bunch of stuff and you're going to start believing in these things that are not healthy for you.
That is an amazing answer in like a few minutes. Wow, wow, wow. So Doc Crocodile has the last 2 questions for us. And I love this question because I know the answer to it and I'm sending you so much love, Doc. But are online friends okay instead of meeting actual people?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just friends. It's friends. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not the professional.
Yeah, human connection can happen in so many different forms. You know, like technology is amazing to me that we're able to connect in this way. I think that there are things that you can get from being face to face with someone, of course, that are irreplaceable. However, connection, love, you know, acceptance, belonging, I think you can definitely find these things in online communities with your online friends. I love that the internet has provided venue for a lot of people that didn't have access to other like-minded folks like themselves previously. Like I mentioned a little while ago that I'm older than I look, friends. And so I grew up in a time with no internet. There was no such thing as that. And so I can vividly recall a lot of people, including myself, that just felt very isolated and alone. I think I mentioned in this talk, actually, I grew up in a community where I was an extreme minority, and that was really hard. And I think back, it's like, gosh, if I had the internet back then, I would know that I'm not the only Asian person. Like, obviously, I know that's true now.
Right.
But, you know, 14-year-old me didn't know so much. And the fact that 14-year-olds now can get on the World Wide Web and access so many people that are like-minded, loving and accepting of them, that is amazing to me. And that's very beautiful. So I think online friendship is very valid and can give us so much satisfaction and love too.
No, I love that so much. And the last question we have for today, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, fam. We're just gonna have to have Haesue back. Is it healthy to release anger through exercising?
Absolutely.
Do it.
So
Sorry.
I mean, the interesting thing about anger is that it's a secondary emotion. So that just means that there's a primary emotion that's underneath it most of the time. A lot of the times we're angry because we're sad. we're depressed, we're feeling down, we're jealous about something. There's something else almost always accompanying anger. It's easier to express anger because it doesn't require us to be as vulnerable and to be as like open about our internal experience. Anger is really wrathful sometimes. There's a lot of energy behind it. And sometimes we feel strong when we're mad, right? So I think physical exercise is a great way to release this and to have an outlet for it. But I think it's also important to address the underlying feelings and the underlying causes of what's making you feel angry in the first place. Because if you're really pissed off every day and you're going to the gym every day, great, you're probably really fit, but you're not addressing what's happening in here and in here that's leading to you to feel angry all the time. You can only get so far with physical exertion of that stuff inside. You got to figure out how to address the stuff inside too. So therapy is like going to the gym for your emotions and your feelings and your thoughts.
We did it! Woo! I mean, there's still more, but we did it. We did it for today. Thank you so much for all of your time and for answering so many questions. Thank you so much to the community for asking such beautiful, and like such a variety of questions just all over. They're awesome. So I normally ask guests how did they find you, but I don't know if that's the way to go about this. So we'll plug stuff. BetterHelp!
Yeah.
Exclamation BetterHelp.
Yeah, BetterHelp. I don't know if you have like a landing page set up for you.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be the plug. If you're curious about me, you can find me at betterhelp.com/Haesue Jo. And this is where you can read a little bit about me. Ironically, I'm a very private person. I told you a couple of times I grew up without internet, so I'm not all up in the social media stuff. So if you're very, very curious, you can at least find my profile at BetterHelp.
There you go. There you go. Exclamation BetterHelp. You get 20% off if you sign up. BetterHelp.com/Mxiety. Thank you so much for being here. Stick around because I got a few things to tell you. But other than that, thank you, Haesue, so much for being here. This was wonderful, and thank you for answering all of our questions and quickly and longly and all. The longly is not a word, but all the ways. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, stick around, everybody. We are gonna be our beat.